That's a real logo.
No, you can see them.
Because
now we're using this camera.
Mel, can I ask how long will we have access to the Moodle after the course finishes tonight? Because I've been pretty busy and I haven't had a chance to get into it yet.
Yep, so we'll talk about that again, but you'll have access until the 18th of May.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, about a month after we finish. So, yeah. We'll definitely talk about Moodle a little bit at the end as well, just to make sure everyone's okay with that. Alright, what we might do is, while we've still got people coming on,
I'm just removing the microphone.
It's the 15 minutes.
That's got it. While we've still got people coming on, we might just get started. So, a huge welcome everybody. Great to see you back. I can't believe that 5 minutes ago so far, and here we are at the end already. And thank you so much for hanging in with us over the last 5 weeks and for coming along often. And many of you have seen every single week, so thank you so much for making the effort. So just before we get into tonight's program a little bit more, I wanted just to do a brief review with you about what we've done so far. And you'll remember on the very first night, Darren led off with our presentations and he talked about why we even do lifestyle medicine, what's the reason for it. He talked about the history of disease and the rise of chronic disease and how that's brought on a need for us to make use of lifestyle medicine so that we treat the cause of disease. And he shared about how there's just been an explosion of lifestyle medicine groups and societies all around the world. And the leading one has been the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So I'm going to make sure I consider that function, and I want you to do the same. And what we have used, I put a little torch on it several times. We have used the pillars of lifestyle medicine as espoused by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So a little quiz for you. Over the weeks we've shared all 6 of those pillars, and we'd love you to have a go at remembering all 6. So get your typing fingers ready, and let's see if we can come up with all 6 pillars in the chat. Go for gold. How quick can we do it? Yes. Okay, Annika and Margaret, you're on the same thing. Okay, we've got 3. Still got 3. Whoa. Excellent. Another one I saw it, stress management, restorative sleep.
No, because this is
Oh, Darren, try and keep your eyes on this. I'm trying, but I'm losing. Yes, risky substances.
Yep. Risky substances is there.
Is there one more? Is it? I'm not sure that I've. Oh yes, Carmen just came up with it. Social connection. Excellent. I think we've got them all, have we? We have. So we saw whole food plant-based nutrition. We saw exercise come up as number 1. So they've really got that one. Stress management, sleep management, avoiding risky substances, and positive relationships. Well done, everyone. Okay, so I have a bonus question. First in with this one. If I had a can of beans to give you for a prize, I would, but this is the bonus golden question, okay? So last week, Simon Matthews, he talked about positive relationships, but he also talked about something else. And he called something the engine room of lifestyle medicine. What was he referring to? It's a 2-word answer. Good try, Peter. Not quite. Not quite. Good try, There we go. Well, everyone's saying behaviour change. Guess what? That's not it.
If you can utilize this, maybe it's franchise.
Keep thinking.
Now I'm feeling guilty now because I was going to say behaviour change.
So this
That was really funny. Darren and I had to discuss today. We couldn't
pillars of lifestyle medicine and.
It was a good analogy though. It was a really good analogy.
We came up with some ideas, but we still haven't got it. Not quite.
This one speaking is Dr. Mel, one of the
I actually
lecturers.
went back and listened to Simon presentation enough to hear what he said.
She
And
also likes
you know
the
what, I
cooking
stood
and
up
also
on,
all sorts of nutrition.
Generative AI.
She enjoys
and the
it.
funny thing was Generative AI said exactly the same thing as Simon, and it referred to Simon's article that he wrote. So, so this is really good trying. It's really close.
Bullshit exclaimed.
The initials for the two words are and C. H and C.
H and C.
Oh, not quite, Kim.
No.
No, not quite.
Can I connect this to that speaker?
I don't think I've seen it. No,
Where's
I
the
definitely
cable?
haven't seen it. Core habits. Let's try. It's like car. Better beans to you. That is it. Simon calls health coaching the engine room. And why does he do that? Because health coaching, as we remember, is all about assisting others to make those behaviour changes. So you'll find it all right, but the words Simon used were health coaching. And as we know, the world is full of people that know what to do but don't actually do it. And they call that the knowledge action gap. And so health coaching is all about helping people to go from that knowledge
I realize
to
that this
action and
because
fulfill that all
they're
while
searching for
maintaining
you,
their autonomy.
but it's not loud
So,
enough.
Yeah, I want to try and use this
if you
one.
get a chance, maybe even look back on Simon's video recording. It's there on Moodle. I know I need to do the same because there's all sorts of tips and tricks in there, not just for us to make behaviour changes ourselves, but to also gently lead others towards making those changes as well. So I thank you for that little group for joining in with me. What we're going to do now is we're going to look ahead, look a little bit to the future, and Darren is going to share some new frontiers of lifestyle medicine. In fact, I think he thinks, and I'm inclined to agree, that it might be time to increase from 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine to at least 7. I don't know, maybe even 8, but it's definitely time for adding something in. And I'm going to let Darren spill the beans on what that is. And so Darren's just going to share with us now for a little while. And I'm going to press record so we get his presentation.
Thanks, Mel. How we going? See, is that come up okay?
Yeah.
Everyone's seen it. Hey, nice to be with you all. And yeah, I'll just say same as what I think I'm pressing the right buttons there. There we go. Got a message I haven't seen before. But hey, really nice to be with you. And yeah, it seems like this has really flown by for me, from my perspective as well. But hope you've been really enjoying learning about lifestyle medicine. So I want to go on a little bit of a different tangent tonight. So yeah, recap, we sort of did an introduction in week 1, and then we've been through the different the pillars of lifestyle medicine, touched on all of them, and then and then Simon, that engine room of health coaching and behaviour change. So to this week,
for our final week, I wanted to sort of look a bit forward and just sort of a bit of a commentary on some of the new things that I think that are emerging in the lifestyle medicine space. And I think that they could contribute in time, and we'll see what you think by the end of this. I think they could actually contribute in time to the development of more pillars of lifestyle medicine. So we've got our 6 established ones at the moment, but you know what is worth noting is that these 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine haven't always been locked in and bedded down. There's been quite an evolution that's taken place in our understanding of the determinants of chronic disease, and hence the appropriateness of these things to sit within the suite of lifestyle medicine. So just to sort of follow and sort of trace this evolution. Early days, I would say that lifestyle medicine was primarily focused on nutrition. And so, we have, and I touched on some of these sort of luminaries in my very first presentation, our introduction session. But this is Paul Esselstyn. He is the guy that wrote that, the book, How to Prevent and Arrest Heart Disease, and Reverse Heart Disease, I should say. And he's really clear that he would say just straight out, cardiovascular disease is a food-borne illness. foodborne disease, which intrigues me, and I can't remember if I mentioned this, but he is actually an Olympic gold medal athlete. And so it was interesting to me because, I have a great interest in exercise, and I'll tell you what, it warmed my heart to see exercise come up so quickly when Mel asked you to type in the determinants in the chat function. But yeah, so the fact that even Corbel Assistant, I remember when I met with him, and he said, "Oh, you exercise, that's secondary. Cardiovascular disease, chronic disease, food-borne illness." And so he was very, very focused on nutrition. So nutrition was sort of
merchandise section because all the merchant.
All right, thanks, Mel. I think we'll just hit the mute. So yeah, nutrition really featured. This is, someone that many of us know and love, Dr. Hans Deal, and we were involved. Both Mel and I were very involved in his program, which was the CHIP program. And I remember him telling me time and time again, he'd say, "Darren, CHIP is a nutrition-driven program." Because I'd always be saying to him, "Let's put more exercise in there." And he's like, "Darren, CHIP is a nutrition-driven program." I remember him saying that to me many times. So, so it was very much that nutrition pillar was what featured in the early days. And I'd say exercise was sort of a bit secondary to that. Dean Ornish, and I touched on him at the beginning of this short course as well. He was the guy that sort of came up with 4 pillars, if you like. So he would talk about nutrition, yes, and he promoted that sort of, predominantly plant-based eating pattern. He would also talk about movement and exercise and physical activity. But then he would talk about stress and the importance of this, and then the whole social connected piece and having what he referred to as having love in your life. And so he'd sort of grown this, and this was, by about the early 90s, I would say, he was promoting these 4 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And then we have, the amazing Dr. David Katz, who's a former president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and has a way with words. He would talk about feet, fork, fingers, sleep, stress, love. So feet is what you're doing in terms of your movement patterns. Fork is what you're doing with your food. So obviously that's the nutrition piece. Fingers is smoking, just in case you're wondering what does that mean. And then sleep, stress, and love. So really this is where we saw the emergence of, bedding in these 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. However, there are some, visionaries who haven't stopped there. And one of them who's, really dearly beloved of us and in Australia, probably considered the father of lifestyle medicine in Australia, Gary Egger, Professor Gary Egger, he expanded it, in fact, and he kept on growing it. And we'll see that growing as towards the end of this presentation. But he had this little acronym that was nasty odours. And you can see if you look down the list there, he spoke about nutrition and activity and stress, and sleep's in there. There's relationships in there. But he had these other things as well. You can see that drugs and alcohol. So he talked there about, obviously, avoidance of risky substances. But there were some other things that he put in there as well, like technology-induced pathologies, social inequity. We'll touch on that again a little bit later. Underexposure to certain things, but also overexposure to other things. So he loves acronyms, and often these epidemiologists do, and that's what he is. And so he came up with a whole heap of these different ones. And I'm interested in one of them in particular, because there's a lot of agitation at the moment that this one in particular should be built into the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. In fact, added to make a 7th pillar of lifestyle medicine. And it relates to, you can see E there on the in his nasty odours. Essentially, we're talking about the environment, about nature. And one of the real drivers of this space is Melissa Sunderman, who she's really pushing hard for the idea. She's actually written an article that was published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. And what she's really saying is that nature, exposure to nature and spending time in nature should be pushed as one of the key pillars of lifestyle medicine. And so what's the grounds for making that kind of claim? And so I thought, just for a bit of fun, and what I want to say here is that we're going a little bit off here. So I'm trying to stay in the house of science, and I'm going to be sharing some studies with you. But what I wouldn't want you to go away and think, oh, yes, that's locked in, because some of this is just emerging science. But I think it's interesting for us to consider as we, still consider, wrestle with this whole idea of what is lifestyle medicine and what pillars should be included in it. So let's have a look at this whole idea of nature as medicine. And well, first off, looking at what's the evidence, that nature has an impact. And then secondly, we'll have a bit of fun looking at what's the mechanisms by which nature might be having the impact that it does. And so first of all, some of the evidence. Look, we've actually had evidence for a long time, and a lot of this is not probably very surprising to you anyway, but you can see, going back sort of 40 odd years ago, we knew that, for example, when people staying in a hospital scenario, and if they had a view to a natural environment, exposed to, nature pretty much through just a window view. This is not even actually being immersed in the actual tangible blue and green space. But we know that they would tend to take less pain-killing medication. They would have shorter hospital stays as compared to those who didn't have that luxury of a window view of nature. As time's gone on, there have been just more and more studies coming to the fore, which are showing that there's some very good physical health benefits, and we'll look at mental health benefits as well, but the physical health benefits of being in blue and green spaces. In Japan, they have a practice they refer to as forest bathing. And what's really interesting here is essentially what they do is they go into a very rich forest treed environment and spend time in there. And what they've found is that you can actually see increases in immune system markers just by spending time in natural environments like this. And in fact, you see, this is increases in things like natural killer T cells, which is part of our very important part of our first line defence for immune function. And what's interesting is that when people actually spent 2 hours or more as a block in that kind of really dense sort of forest environment, you would actually see spikes, increases in their natural killer T cells, and those cells would stay elevated for up to 7 days later. So you're actually seeing that not just a spike, but these long-term effects and benefits of spending time in a natural environment. So that's a great news from an immune system perspective. Certainly from a mental health perspective, just the evidence here is quite overwhelming, coming through showing that when people spend time in natural environments and have close access and are proximal to blue and green spaces, that their mental health metrics really have really improved. So this particular study, this is one of my favourites, done in New Zealand. What the researchers did is they looked at the city of Auckland, and they could actually look and map and monitor using satellite imagery how much blue and green space people had close to their homes. And what they found is that those who had, for every 1% increase in your, being surrounded, increase in green space close to you, there was a 4% reduction in mood disorders. And so, 1%, 4%, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but what this means is that if you doubled your access to green space, right, so that's a 100% increase, we're looking at a 400% reduction in depression and anxiety. So this is a huge mental health benefit. More recently, this was published in Lancet Planet Health. You can see a huge cohort here of people, and what they found is very strong connection between people's access to green space and spending time in natural environments and their risk of developing depression and anxiety. And so there seems to be something very calming and very therapeutic about nature for our bodies and also for our brains. And I should point out here, we often talk about green spaces, but I like to talk about blue and green should often be seen, because there's actually a lot of evidence now to suggest that blue spaces are actually really good for us. In fact, being around water, being in water, being underwater is actually, there's huge benefits associated with that. And I actually heard this gentleman speak. There were Melissa Sunderman, who I mentioned earlier. They have it's like a member interest group in the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which is called Nature as Medicine. And she hosts sort of a group meetup once a month where people can come along and just share, and they get special speakers. And they actually got this guy here, Wallace Nichols, along, who wrote the book Blue Mind, and an amazing guy, just talking about all the science and the evidence demonstrating that blue spaces are really, really good for us. And one of his favourite things to do is he would give out marbles, these blue marbles to people. That was almost like his little card that he gave to people, because what he said is, you know what, we live on a blue planet. We're immersed when we should immerse ourselves in these blue as well as green spaces. Really sadly, Wallace Nichols, about 2 weeks after he presented to our group and we got to share with him, he actually passed away. It was really sad. He wasn't actually that old either. So, but made a real, contribution in helping us understand and see the value and the importance of blue spaces as well as green. So the question can be asked, okay, all the epidemiological sort of studies are showing that there's something really good about nature and it's very therapeutic for us, for our bodies and brains, but what's the mechanism? What's going on? Why does it work that way? Well, one thing definitely seems to be the case is that our brains are really geared and like natural landscapes. And there are many studies that have been done now, including this one here, looking at brain imaging when people are exposed to different sorts of images, either natural landscapes, like you can see the blue and green there, or urban built environments. And what you find is that, we won't worry too much about those images, but essentially when your eyes are exposed to natural environments, it lights up regions of our brain associated with positive emotional states. Whereas when we see these sort of built environments, our brains just naturally light up with sort of these aversive areas. And so it seems like our brains are just tuned into this, that the images that are striking our eyes have quite an impact on our health and happiness. And one thing we're learning about in particular, and some of you may have seen the science in this space, but we definitely know that there is something very good about being exposed to bright natural light. Now, I'm not talking about staring at the sun, by the way, so don't do that. But what we know is that just being outdoors where there is bright sunlight, that's very, very good, especially for our mental health. But there are other effects it has as well, as I'll touch on in just a moment. But what we know is, I know we've got some people from all around the world here, but many of you be familiar with the condition called SAD, which is seasonal affective disorder. This is where people living in high latitudes during the long winter months where there's very low lighting, that depression is very high, suicidal ideation is very high, and so and we actually, they even use a therapy now called bright light therapy or bright light treatment, where they have a device that emits quite bright light that sits off to the side of people, and for about half an hour, as they're reading their paper or doing something in the morning, they just have this bright light exposed to them. And what we find is there's very significant reductions in depression. It's a great treatment modality. In fact, it's outperformed in some instances even antidepressant medications. So what is it about nature? Well, there's something about the sights that we're experiencing and the brightness of the light. It's interesting, you don't realise this, but indoor spaces are nowhere near as well lit up as outdoor spaces. And you wouldn't pick this, but on a bright sunny day, the intensity of it's all around you can be in the order of like 200 times greater than what you experience in indoor spaces. And so, given that so many of us now spend so much of our time indoors, there's thinking that it's almost like we're creating our own seasonal affective disorder, right? We're just not getting enough exposure to bright natural light. And so, the sights that we're seeing, the light that we're encountering on our eyes, we know can have a really significant impact on our mood state. But what we're also discovering is that within your brain, you're actually picking up, on cues from the natural environment, visual cues from the environment, particularly things like the sun coming up, midday, the sun going down. And what it does is actually help synchronise our biological clocks. And so there's great interest now in this whole idea of chronobiology. You know, our biology, how it's time determined and time dictated. And we know that by immersing in natural environments and seeing the sun and seeing the sunset and these things and seeing nightfall, it actually helps in train it gets our body clocks working in balance. And when we do that, there's a whole lot of health outcomes and health benefits that emerge from that. So what's happening? Why is nature so good? Well, we're still learning and discovering more about this, but certainly there's something about the visual cues that we're exposed to. There's something about the things that hit our eyes that actually are really good for our health and our happiness. But also it goes a little bit deeper than that. And this is where it gets a little bit, I'm going to have a bit of fun with this. So once again, I don't want you to get too like, oh, Darren said this, because I'm just sharing with you some interesting little observations that are out there at the moment. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time before the science starts to really consolidate and we have a better understanding of some of these things. But nonetheless, these things are fun to explore anyway. What we know is that your brain and and synchronisation of body clocks and all the rest of it is not just influenced by the sights that we see, but also our other senses as well, such as our hearing, but also and this happens on a lot more subtle level, but also smell and taste and these textures that we pick up in natural environments that often we're unconscious of. Right? So they're picked up at a subconscious level, but they can have some really interesting impacts. So let me just say a couple of things about sound and then smell in particular, or what we're breathing in. First of all, here's the sound part. We definitely know that music can be very therapeutic, and there's actually some studies done, including randomised control trials, looking to show that when people have the right kind of sound that they're exposed to, it's really good and can produce some really good health outcomes. For example, we know that it's very calming before surgery, can reduce reliance upon things like medications for pain, and so it's really quite interesting that it seems like the sounds that we're exposed to can have an impact on us, even if we're not that consciously aware of them. And there is something very calming, it seems, and therapeutic about the natural sounds that we experience in nature. And what's intriguing about this, they can actually be quite loud. I don't know if you've ever, I do this with our students sometimes, we spend a whole week looking at nature as medicine. And for this lecture, I actually take them to the beach. And we're at the beach there where the waves are breaking and we're talking. And then I say to them, just want you to close your eyes for a second and just listen. And what they all comment on is how loud the waves are. It's background peripheral noise, but it's loud. And normally, if it's artificial type noise, that would become quite intolerable quite quickly. But it's almost like that sound is actually almost quite calming. Or running water, or birds. These things that we know that there is something about nature and the sounds that are emitted in those spaces that seems to be very good for us. Once again, it's very, very calming for our brain. So sound, so sights in nature, the light in nature, the sounds of nature, and here's a really interesting one, the smells, or in particular, what I'm going to talk about is the air that we breathe. Here is an interesting little mud map, right? This is from 2005. This is the prevalence of obesity within the United States, in the various states. So you can see that the different colours, and if you look at what the black there, the sort of black textured colour, that represents that about 25 to 29% of the adults in that particular area, actually it might be, I think my little numbers are out there, sorry, I think that's over 30% of the adults in that particular state are considered to be in the obese range. Right? This is having a body mass index greater than 30. Right? So, and as we go down in the red, that's between 20 to 25 to 29% of the adults in that population considered have a BMI above 30, and then we go down to the yellow, and then we keep going down. Now, I want you to take a look at what state seems to be doing the best? Okay, so this is 2005, here's 2006, here's 2007, and you can actually get these charts, by the way, these obesity maps from the Centre of Disease Control, and you can actually count them from about 1980, and you just look at the colour, and the colours get darker and darker and darker and darker as the years go on, and you even see a little bit of evidence of that as I progress from 2005, 2006, 2007. But there's one state that actually stands out there as doing a bit better than the others. If you want to put it in the chat function, what state is that? That blue one there. It seems to be doing a whole lot better than some of the others. I can't see any of the chat responses because I'm sharing my screen, but Mel, have we got the right answer?
We have. Annika is onto it. Colorado, she said.
Colorado, Rocky Mountain High, as John Denver used to tell us. So here's the question, why is that? Why is Colorado doing better than the other states? Could it be, they've actually they're quite an outdoory kind of culture there, and they've got like an institute of sport there, so they do all that. We had one of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine conferences was in Denver just a couple of years ago, and I went there, and then after the conference I met with a couple of my friends from Australia. They flew over, and we actually did a road trip all the way back from Colorado all the way back to California, and we just went trail running in all the national parks like Yosemite and Zion and Grand Canyon. It was totally amazing. But the first one we did was in the Colorado Rockies. And you know what? They are high. In fact, they go up to about over 14,000 feet. And you know what? Even Colorado, like Denver, the actual it looks like it's on the plane, that's pretty high. That's like 5,000 feet, right? And you can do the conversions to in your own mind. But so here's the question that's been raised. So I'm going to tuck this thought away. They're all at altitude there. It's actually quite high altitude. A lot of the population live at high altitude. Well, that's interesting, because there is this theory, this thought that's been thrown out there, and that is that we know when people start to go to altitude, they tend to change their feeding behaviours. So, for example, I've got some friends that have actually been to Everest Base Camp, and they will tell you that as you start to get into those very high altitudes, you actually just don't feel like eating. You have to force yourself to eat, because otherwise you start to lose weight and you lose energy and all the rest of it. So tuck this thought away. Could altitude be doing something to people's obesity levels, certainly, because of the change in the impact that it's having on people's feeding behaviours? Well, here's a really interesting idea, and this has actually been proposed and published, and that is that, I'll skip back and I'll tell you a little bit of a story. Do you know when you go to high altitude, what starts to happen is you start to ventilate more rapidly, right? So you breathe in and out faster. And what that does, it's like a hyperventilation. What that starts to do is you in a sense, you dilute the carbon dioxide concentrations in your blood. And it can actually create this thing they call respiratory alkalosis. If you hyperventilate enough or you go to high altitude, you'll actually start to feel quite dizzy because you've blown off, you've got rid of a lot of the carbon dioxide that's in your body that you're transporting. And so here's the thinking, right? If you reduce the carbon dioxide content in your body because you're going to higher altitude, you tend not to want to eat as much. Right? And what they think happens is that when you start to reduce the CO2 levels in your body, it affects the appetite regulation area in your brain, and you just don't feel like eating. But think about this: if reducing the carbon dioxide levels in your body causes you to reduce your appetite, what would happen if you were to go the other direction and actually increase the carbon dioxide concentrations in your body? Well, could it be that actually makes you want to eat more? Like, could that actually upregulate your appetite? And this is the theory that's been proposed. So that there is this theory argues that there may actually be this link between carbon dioxide levels and in our bodies and our desire to want to eat more. Well, guess what? We actually know that over the past 40 years or so in particular, we've got more carbon dioxide in our bodies because there's more in the atmosphere and we're breathing a lot more of this. In fact, there's even some studies which have indicated that that amongst wild animals, there has actually been weight gain. So it's like, and you're thinking, well, wild animals, they're not running off to McDonald's and KFC and doing all this, but they're in natural environments. But if they, because of these increasing CO2 levels, if it starts to upregulate their appetite, they would be eating more than they needed as well. And so it's really quite interesting. I won't dive much deeper into it than that, but it is quite interesting to look at the rise in obesity in the past 30 or 40 years. Very much parallels the rise in CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. So anyway, fun fact and a little bit of a thought. So here's the thing: we're not quite sure about the mechanisms. We're not quite sure what's going on. We're getting a bit of an idea that certainly there's something about natural environments, being in blue and green spaces, that the sights that we're exposed to, the light that we're exposed to, the sounds that we're hearing, even the air that we're breathing, right, and the tastes and all that go along with that. And we could talk more about that. You know, you're picking up, you know, pheromones and all these things that you don't even consciously unaware of, but they're there. Could it be that they actually have quite an impact on our health and our happiness as well? And so this is why Melissa Sunderman is really pushing that, hey, you know what, we need to think more seriously about about the environment and nature. And you know, I love this. This was a Medscape release, and I saw the title and I thought, isn't this interesting? Because what it shows is that the medical community is starting to talk about this more and more and take this a whole lot more seriously. You know, will your next prescription, and I love the idea of lifestyle prescription. Could it be that one day we go to the doctor and they go, yep, here's your script, you know, X number of minutes of walking each day, these particular food items, whole food plant based items that I like you, and 20 minutes of nature a day in the most blue and green rich space that you can find. Where the regardless of what the mechanism is, we definitely know that being outdoors is great. There is something really great about the great outdoors, and if you can get outside for about 30 minutes each day, 20 to 30 minutes each day, that's great. But if you can spend a 2-hour chunk at some time over the course of the week, that's really, really good. And it seems to be a bit of a dose-response relationship too. If you can do more than 2 hours, like, you know, even go for like 200 to 300 minutes, that's sort of, you know, getting up to, you know, 4 or 5 hours outside doing your thing. There's huge benefits from both a mental health and a physical health perspective for it. So the way I see it, blue and green should often be seen. So what do you think? I reckon, Mal, now would be a good time to break out into some groups. And before, because I've got one other proposal, one other potential pillar proposal that I'd like to share with you. But what are your thoughts on this? Should nature be included in the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine? I have a couple of minutes to chat about that in your groups.
I'll be having a group here, so you can also discuss in your group.
Recording in progress.
I'm at camp and I'm using my wife's computer because I can't get onto the internet with my own computer.
I think you're on mute, Mel.
Sorry, did I send him?
Yeah, he's sent.
I'm still getting free saying like, oh, Marvellous. Did Marvellous get to go to a room? I sent him off to one.
Yeah, send me to one.
Oh, sorry, Marvellous. I thought I did, but I must have let. Here we go.
Find the
Yeah, why is it keep on returning me?
Recording in
Let's give him
progress.
a good chunk of time to chat about that.
Yeah, okay. That's good. That's good.
I'm not sure.
No, that's amazing. It is amazing. I remember learning that stuff about Colorado, but couldn't remember why it was. So,
I'm not sure. Sorry, Dr. Mel.
oh, what happened to you, Marvellous?
You sent me to a group, but it returned me to you.
I'll try again. Hang on, one more. Yeah, dear. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Let's try this.
Says join room.
I'm supposed to join a certain room with some other colleagues.
It says join, then I think the next word's room.
It will still return me.
And today you could just.
Recording in progress.
Really?
Yeah.
Marvellous, I am so sorry. Where is he? I can't see him. I don't know what's going on.
No, I don't know what's happening, but it's.
You're meant to be with us, Marvellous.
Oh, that's
No, Deb.
that's good. I can't wait to learn more from you.
So sorry. I have no idea why it's doing that. Do you get to go into a room and then it just kicks you back out?
Yeah,
Is that what's happening?
I'm not really sure. Like Professor Darren have said, maybe, yeah, I have to be with you guys.
Yeah, dear. How's life treating you in the UK?
In the UK, I think nature is very good. This should be actually part of their nutrition, part of their lifestyle medicine. I think it's necessary. I was also looking on how herbs, how weeds, they tell us about soils and everything else. So I second that, Prof. Darren.
Okay, I missed some of that. I don't know why. Did you get that down? I broke up for me. I'm sorry, Marvellous. I didn't.
Yeah, I think we had a bad connection from out there, but no.
Okay.
It's good. You got some good things going on.
No,
I do love that image. Did you take that photo or did you find that somewhere else?
Both.
with the bananas and the trees.
On my background, I think, yeah, it was, being creative on the. I made one, but the photo I also took it from somebody.
Right.
Yes.
It's cool. Makes me feel tropical.
So what do you do, Marvellous? Tell us about what's your role? What do you do?
For now, I'm a student at Newport College here in the UK.
Okay.
I'm doing.
What do you study?
I'm doing theology. I'm doing graduate diploma in theology.
Right. Okay, so you're doing a graduate diploma. You've obviously got a bachelor's degree in something else.
Yes.
What was that?
Tourism and hospitality management.
Okay.
How many students at Newbold?
To be honest, I will lie. If I give a number, I will be lying.
Okay, not quite sure.
And but now I'm interested. I've never seen a lifestyle center here in the UK. What should we do for us to have one?
That's a good question. I I was chatting with someone who I think was talking. Is Steve Currow? Is he the president?
Yeah. That's my principal.
That's your principal?
Yes.
Yeah, so I know someone who is in the lifestyle medicine space who's been chatting with Steve about the potential to have some sort of more a lifestyle type of initiative at New Bold. So how did you hear about this short course?
Yeah, one of our colleagues at school, I think he shared it with the students, and that's why I picked it up. And I said, this is meant for me. I should join this one.
Very cool. Because now Newbold, is Newbold only doing theology now?
Only. I think.
Is it just a seminary, or does it do other courses as well?
Yeah, I'm sure there are actually other departments, other faculties which they also focus on.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I didn't know whether they'd reduced to just being a theology seminary, but they're still doing other things. That's good.
Okay. So I think it's a quote to Dr. Mel. When are you giving us the recipe for today?
The recipe?
Yes.
It's coming.
It's coming later. It's a bit of a sweet treat today, Marvellous, but yeah, it's coming. It'll be coming.
Oh, wow.
Are you interested in cooking?
Yes, and today I've got also friends who are listening to you as you are talking.
She does it well, doesn't she?
She does it well. Yeah, and
very cool, very cool.
Come on, Jen. I
reckon we can bring him in now. Bring him back.
Okay, we'll do that. Lovely to have a chat, Marvellous.
Yeah, good to chat.
Thank you so much. It's also my pleasure to be chatting with the directors and the leaders.
Darren's the big boss.
Welcome back. I think we've got 2 more seconds and everyone should be joining us. Excellent. All right, welcome back, team. Hey, I'm interested. In the chat function, yes/no question, so Y or N, do you think, would you be supportive of nature being added as 7th pillar of lifestyle medicine? What do you reckon? Type it in. Yes or no?
What did you conclude?
And Mel, I can't see, so...
Well, we got Y, 100%, yes.
We've got a lot of Ys.
Absolutely.
And definitely.
Ah! Well, you know what?
I'll support Darren.
Very
We'll report this back to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and we'll say, the short course people said you have to, and then you know what? If they go that way, we'll all just go, yay, it was us. So anyway, look, I think it's an emerging space. There's still a lot to learn, but I think it's a really interesting one, and certainly, you know, for me personally, my happy spot, my healthy spot, is being active outdoors, and so anyway, sounds like many of you can sympathise with that and empathise with it. So there is, as I said, there is actually already an article that's been published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, sort of advocating for nature to be the 7th pillar. I think, and this is me going out on a complete limb, so this is just an idea, but I actually think there's grounds for another one as well. And I'm going to refer to this. Let's just assume that the 7th one gets across the line. We're going to call this the 8th one, right? So this is the 8th pillar of lifestyle medicine. Return first of all to this gentleman here. This is Professor Gary Eger, and I mentioned to you, and we saw this little acronym that he came up with called Nasty Odours, which has all these different things in there. Anyway, Gary had an interesting experience. He did a lot of work with Indigenous communities in Australia, with the Aboriginal people, and what he found is he came away really, because we know that chronic disease risk amongst that population is very, very high, and he was trying to get a handle on why is it? Why do these people suffer so much from, chronic diseases, these lifestyle-related diseases? And he ended up by coming back and he grew his acronym. And it went from nasty odours to nasty malodors. And what the mal stood for is he said that when, talking with these people, there's a loss of culture, a loss of identity. There's alienation, particularly from each other, but also from their ways of heritage, of how they lived. And what this boils over into is this sense of meaninglessness. And so he actually started to push for this whole idea that, there seems to be, and there's good evidence for this as we'll see, this idea of a lack of a sense of meaninglessness can actually be really important independent risk factor for chronic conditions. And conversely, having a sense of meaning in your life can actually be very powerful and very healing. And so he started to really advocate for that. As all good epidemiologists do, he ended up by going them a little further. So it went from nasty odours to nasty malodors. And then when he was observing the literature, what he saw is that there was an increasing interest and attention in these things called ACEs. Right? And I don't know if you've come across ACEs before, but this stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And so he actually grew his acronym to nasty odours with ACE, meaningless, alienation, loss of identity, and adverse childhood experiences. And what Gary Egger argued, he said, look, we know that we're drowning in these flood, of chronic conditions. We've got, that the waters are flowing out, the ocean is full. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, neurodegeneration, and the list goes on. And he said, and what's causing that? What's if we look upstream a little bit? Yes, it's things like poor diet, it's inactivity, it's stress, it's smoking, it's all those lack of social connection, those pillars of lifestyle medicine. They're the tributaries that are running into this deep flood that we have. And what he started to say is, hey, you know what? But let's look further upstream, right? And could it be that things like meaninglessness, right, and lack of identity, could it be that these are actually the upstream factors that are flowing on to causing people to eat unhealthily, to not want to move, to rely on substances? And so he started to draw attention to this whole idea of the importance of these really upstream determinants. Now, just to take a quick snapshot look at this whole idea of adverse childhood experiences. Essentially what they are is when, in younger years, when children experience some sort of threat, some form of abuse in its various different manifestations, or some sort of deprivation and neglect, so it's abuse and neglect. And what we know is that about, within the United States at least, about half of adults have had or experienced some sort of, ACE, some sort of adverse childhood experience. But here's the interesting thing. When they started to map and see, okay, what's the flow-on effect of these adverse childhood experiences, what they found is that it actually, as an independent risk factor, right, even if you account for the other things that we know contributed to chronic diseases, ACEs alone were this huge burden of disease. They're actually contributing to about 15% of deaths annually in the United States. And the list is quite comprehensive. It's, for example, about 21 million cases of depression can be attributed to meaninglessness. But things, okay, you think, okay, well, I can understand how, trauma in childhood could flow onto, poor mental health later in life. But it's also things like heart disease, overweight, obesity. So these physical conditions as well. And I won't go through all the stats here, but we know that these adverse childhood experiences are actually having a big impact on a whole range of physical health conditions, not just mental health conditions as well, which they do clearly. This lady here is actually an Australian researcher, quite young, I'm assuming she looks young, based at Sydney University, but when they're doing the research looking at how adverse childhood experiences influence mortality and morbidity in adults, what they found is that the evidence just is really clear. And her point, and I like it relates to what Gary Egger had sort of it sort of represented, as you could see, that figure that I had of the floodwaters, is that, you know, she says we need to think about causes of death to include upstream drivers of poor health. So let's just not think about these, certainly not moving, but what's driving them? You know, what are the upstream factors? And so what she concluded is that, you know, these things are really taking a toll. Why is that? Why is it that adverse childhood experiences could play into these other things? Well, because it relates once again to what Gary Eger had talked about. This whole idea of there's a loss of identity. You know, there's a sense overwhelmingly of meaninglessness. Right? And so I think, here's my little conjecture, is that maybe meaning, you know, having a sense of meaning in life, we definitely know it's protective as a health, you know, determinant. You know, maybe that having a sense of meaning in life should be considered to be also one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine. And if it is the case, well, what would it look like to actually help promote and foster a sense of meaning in people's life? And I really like the work of this lady here. This is Emily Asfani-Smith, who's identified through her research that there seems to be four pathways, four things that people can sort of use as tools for experiencing more meaning in their life. And the four tools are, the first one is belonging. And what she's found is that when people have a sense of belonging, and she uses this words, and I find this quite interesting, a sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. Right? So that phrasing seems to emerge very commonly. But this sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. When you have that, you know, that's, and obviously this ties in with the social connection piece of which is already an established pillar of lifestyle medicine. But when people have that sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves, then it promotes meaning in their lives. You know, and that may be, that belonging might be belonging to a social group, or belonging to, you know, it might even be a workplace environment where you feel very much part of a team. Certainly part of a faith community would feed into that belonging to something bigger than the self. And what we know is that sense of belonging, you know, that social connection, that love in your life is a very, very important factor for promoting meaning and indeed health and happiness. This is, you know, I think it may have been Simon that actually referred to this last week, but this is one of the landmark studies that speaks to this, and it's the Harvard study of human development, where they've been following people for over 80 years now. And one of the things they found is that, this is a quote from the current lead researcher of the program, is that, you know, when we look at people in their relationships, that sense of belonging, that sense of love that they have in their life, people who have that, you know, in their 50s, they're the ones that are healthiest in their 80s. You know, and that even more so than if you measure people's cholesterol levels and their blood pressure and some of these other biometrics. So, you know, it really speaks to that importance of having a sense of belonging, you know, connection, belonging to something bigger than yourself. That's the first pathway to meaning. Second one is having a sense of purpose, something that you're serving. And in her words, she says, purpose comes from having a sense of contributing to or serving something bigger than yourself. Right? And you can see there's a really common theme that starts to emerge here. It's about belonging to something bigger than yourself, having a sense of serving something bigger than yourself. So, you know, one of the key messages in promoting meaning is actually realising it's not about you, which is a bizarre kind of twist and irony. You know, it's actually by getting outside ourselves and being part of something bigger that we actually discover real meaning in our own life. And so what we know is that when people have a greater sense of purpose, when people have a greater sense of contributing in some way, you know, making a difference, being useful, for want of a simple way of saying it, what we know is that, you know, there is a huge reduction when people have that, a reduction in premature mortality, death from all causes. And so this whole idea of having that sense of purpose, you know, very powerful pathway to meaning. This is Michael Steger, and he's written a lot and does a lot of research on that whole purpose piece. And this is what he says. You know, maybe the answer to why are we here, or to the why we are here question, is actually a matter of life and death. You know, it's so linked. Having that sense of purpose and sense of meaning in your life is so connected to mortality that he would make a statement like this. And so, you know, that idea of belonging to something bigger than yourself, having a sense of purpose, serving, contributing to something bigger than yourself, feed into our sense of meaning. The third pathway is this. She refers to it as transcendence. And what does transcendence mean? It basically means being elevated, you know, to something bigger than yourself. Right? It's getting out from amongst the trees and actually seeing the forest. And what we know is that when people have these transcendent experiences, it's very deeply meaningful for them. Promotes meaning in their life. And once again, this comes in various different ways for different people. So, for example, nature can actually be a pathway to experiencing these transcendent moments. And I think about, I mentioned that I went trail running with my friends throughout Colorado and so on, and we went to the Grand Canyon. I've been there twice now. I love that place. And I can tell you, every time when I get out of the car and you walk over and you stand on the edge of that canyon and your eyes sort of adjust like this, it's a bit transcendent. It's like there is something hugely vast, you know, and the interesting thing is, it makes you feel really small, but it's also, there's something really transcendent about it, and it's deeply meaningful. Some people find, you know, natural environments transcending. Others, it can be the arts, you know, for example, through music or through artistic endeavours and creation. These things can be transcendent moments. For people of faith, worship experiences, you know, these transcendent moments where you get elevated to something bigger than yourself. And what we know is that when people have these transcendent moments, once again, they tend to report more a deeper sense of meaning in their life. And I love this quote. This is Neil Armstrong, and he says this, and this was as they're returning, you know, back to Earth in their tiny little capsule, and he says, you know, it suddenly struck me that tiny pea, pretty in blue, was the Earth. And he says, I put my thumb up and shut one eye, and my thumb blotted out the entire planet. And get this, he says, I didn't feel like a giant. I felt very, very small. And there's this quite interesting dynamic that happens. You know, when we actually are exposed to something bigger than ourselves, we often feel very small, and yet it makes us feel it's very meaningful in the same instance. And I find this quite interesting, that there's this smallness that actually is deeply meaningful, because we realise that there's something bigger, we're part of something bigger out there. And so these pathways, you know, having a sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself, a sense of serving something bigger than yourself, having these transcendent moments where you get lifted to something bigger than yourself. And then last of all, and I actually find this really quite fascinating the older I get, is that she talks about storytelling, right, and sharing stories as deeply meaningful as well. And I've come to believe this is very, very true. I think Indigenous cultures do this very well, you know, and that we've lost that ancient wisdom to a large extent through stories. Because you know what I think happens is that when we share stories, and the best stories that we share actually tick all the other three boxes above it. So, for example, you know, when you share a story about yourself, or I share a story with you about myself, it actually creates that belonging, you know, and we also, and the best stories, you know, the stories that we love to read about or watch, or they're the stories that have some sort of purpose, some sort of, you know, there's a service aspect to it. Like, you know, don't judge me, but I love the Lord of the Rings movies, because it's what it's about. It's about this group of people who are banded together on this common cause to actually save the world. You know, it's like there's this noble service. And what's really interesting is that the stories that we often love actually often incorporate elements of some sort of sacrifice. You know, you've actually got to, it's like they're doing it, they're trying to do this honourable thing at personal cost to them, right? And there's something about those sorts of stories that we find transcendent. Like when you hear about a story like that, or you read about a story, or you watch a story like that, it does lift you. It lifts you to something bigger than yourself. And you know, and I think what storytelling does, and this is what Emily Smith says, is that when we share our stories and we hear from each other, your story becomes part of my story, and my story becomes part of your story. And then what happens in that process is that we realise that we're all part of a bigger story that's happening. We're all, all characters in that. And so this whole idea of storytelling, it's deeply meaningful. And I don't think we exploit the benefits of it near enough. There is actually more interest, and even within healthcare settings and circles, there's this idea of narrative, of story-based medicine. Getting people together. We're so isolated nowadays, but getting people together to hear stories, to share stories, is a really powerful way to promote that sense of meaning. And in my opinion, and I think there's good evidence for this, that having that sense of meaning, that sense of belonging, purpose, transcendence, storytelling, that meaning, I would love to advocate for that to be promoted as, once again, one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine. I'm wondering what you think about that. And so we are going to give you another little breakout room just for a few minutes. And what we've touched on is, we know that there are these established 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, but is there room for some more? And it sounds like you're quite supportive of the idea of nature being, a 7th pillar of lifestyle medicine. What about this whole meaning piece, helping to promote meaningful lives for people? Do you think that has room to be one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine as well? Let's jump into some groups, introduce yourself, and have a brief chat about that.
My time is up. I'm supposed to end at 11:30, so we can make a decision to continue watching them, or I can log off now. Then we've got our question and answer now. Okay, there is one motion for question and answers.
Touches on that in a sense, is it? Like the idea of meaning and purpose and giving, basically, essentially? Probably giving is probably a subsidiary of meaning, isn't it? Like the meaning is just seeking purpose in life. But the idea of giving can also give meaning, isn't it, to many people involved in many volunteer organisations, in a sense. So,
yeah, as far as I'm aware, there's really good evidence around, the act of that benevolent act and getting something back from that yourself, and whether it's improved mood or sense of well-being or whatever it is, or whether or not that makes you feel more connected or part of something greater. I'm a big believer in that. Yeah.
I guess so we often get carried away with how it all works, whereas you just contribute to life and things work out well. Someone put in the comment the story of Jesus when they're talking about the storytelling stuff. And the way Christianity's set up, the way we were set up as from creation onwards, we give and we take, and when you give, you get back.
Yeah, I also learned that the Bible itself, it's a storytelling book. It's very narrative. So, yeah, we can take it as a storybook and we can enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I think people get different things from it, and probably people would experience some of the common, transcendence and belonging and things from other faiths as well. So I don't know that it's necessarily unique to one particular faith. It's yeah.
I think my internet is slow. It's slow. But anyway, once more, good morning.
You need to
Okay. Okay. Anyone wants to share with us what we have learned or what we have seen? One thing that I've learned. Let me just give a brief background of how I perceive this learning of ours. Number one, know your audience. This is one principle that I've learned. At a university or from the university side, you know, I am dealing with intellectuals. Quote me well. From a university setup, I know my audience is university intellectuals, both students and lecturers. So, if you want to attend lecturers, if you have a certain case you want to address, I can just bring the book Ministry of Healing and talk about nature, and talk about oxygen, and talk about as simple as that, but it may not appeal to them because Ellen White to them is not a scholar. Are you getting the sense?
Yes. Yes.
So now, to make sense out, to appeal to them, Solomon once said that there is nothing new under the sun. So whatever subject you are going to talk about, there is something about that subject. So if I want to address you as a student, I can boldly say, oh, there is this student who studied or who wrote a dissertation on hydrotherapy.
So where is your Zoom here?
So he said water is good for A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And to make it more interesting, some of the professors are our own Adventist believers. So they took what exactly is in the SOP, and they put it on the table.
We need you to be at the front so the people on Zoom can see you, because we are now going to disconnect your presentation.
All right, it's
the
fine.
university one.
Yeah,
so we
fine.
put on to you, and then we need to disconnect that
And
because you're using the mic.
Not a problem.
So if we can do that.
This one is not showing as I.
We need him to disconnect.
Yeah, we need to
Okay. Okay.
Then we need you to use the mic.
Oh.
If you're standing over there.
All right. So it's.
We need this on. It's still connected.
It's still connected.
Still connected to it.
To this one. Oh, let me change that. I looked out of Zoom, so it's not connected.
So you're off now.
It's still on. It's still on.
Oh, this one is connected to.
It's connected to this one.
Yeah, because that camera is projecting on Zoom that. So we need it to go on there. Whatever this presentation is.
All right.
Yeah, so if you, because you're no longer on this projecting, isn't it? So if you remove the projector.
All right.
And then if you stand in front of that.
All right, it's fine. We'll talk about food as medicine on Friday. Today, let's just do the discussions, and then we call it a day.
You can continue while we're sorting out.
Okay, it's fine.
Let's go and see in camera. You did see this.
I think you can set up some more stages.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that you can continue.
Oh, okay, yeah, which is
need
fine.
to be able to say, need to be able to say, yeah.
Okay, which is fine.
This camera, this one.
Oh, you mean this one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, then you can see it.
So they can see you.
Okay. This one, let me cover this one. Okay, those on camera, I'm sure now they can see me, right? I can see myself over there.
As they can see, they can monitor and stuff.
Okay. All right. I was highlighting the principles of God is calling you, God is calling me, and He has given us the right end of the gospel. So we should not embark on this journey blindly. We will learn much about it in the afternoon as we are preparing to go out. So I was giving the illustration from the university setup. You have to know your audience. No, majority of us, we are all professionals. We are not students. Some of us, we are doctors. Some of us, we are nurses. Some of us, we are geologists. Some of us, we are farmers. Some of us, we are directors of many successful companies, be it here in UK or even abroad. But now the sweetest moment is that when you realize these are the people I want to attend, and then now you put your mind into it. God, how best can I reach these what? These minds. I hope I'm loud and clear. Now, just out of interest, what are the object lessons? Maybe we've got some people who learned one or two from Dr. Darren, from Prof. Darren. Actually, I looked out before Dr. Mel gave us. She usually brings interesting recipes almost every session. So I'll fetch it and I'll bring it some other time, what she would have brought in today. So now, out of interest, what are the lessons that we have learned from the presentation?
I think what I've learned is...
Mike, I think for this guy.
I think what I...
Yeah, you've got to speak round.
Go to the car. What I've learned is that from the presentations that were being done, is that we, just the same way we make so much emphasis on the gospel, we need to make the same emphasis on the health message.
Amen.
We seem to emphasize more on victory over sin and all obedience and the law and so forth, which is correct and it is right, but we don't seem to make the same emphasis on health. Therefore, when we do presentation, because once I make that emphasis, I can leave it out of my nature. So, because we are not making that emphasis and we are not in part leaving it, because I'm more, and the reason why I am not leaving it is because I have a dependence on the system, if you understand what I'm saying. I have a dependence on the system. So I know that if my health is to really go south, there is a backup system which can always come in. And, whereas it's different with the law. The obedience to victory over sin, you don't have a backup system. There's nobody else you can say, oh, Girish, can you sort of help me on this obedience? Whereas on health, I know that if things really go south, there's always the NHS. So therefore, I don't make so much emphasis on health because there is always the NHS. If we would leave it and make that emphasis, I'm sure the miracles that we see in the scriptures of people being prayed and healed and so forth would happen in our lives, in our lifetime. Because we are living it, so we can experience it. So when I go out to tell you, I'm not telling you something I've read or something I've heard somebody presenting. I'm telling you what I'm living. Therefore, there is a bit of oomph when I'm giving it out. You know what I mean? Rather than just, I've read this, this is what you do. You've got a cold, what do you do? We all know, cayenne pepper, honey, ginger, lemon, water. But how does that work in everyday life? We can't explain, but that's what we know. Because we have heard Pastor Marvellous telling us Blumel.
There was this beautiful. They are beautiful. And she was. But one thing I knew.
Are we all being kicked out? Can anybody see anything, hear anything? We can't hear anything.
thinking about how the knowledge of laws turns now up.
Getting help, simply being outdoor areas where we are busy working in the fields. And we grew up with this blue-green thing when we were growing up back at home. You see, I wish we could be able to come back. No, it's the only problem is that now we are locked up in our apartments and also in there. You see, so I wish we could be able to go back again to basics, and you'll discover that our lives will be back again to health that we had before.
What does the church say? And to make it more interesting, yeah, actually, it's one of the lessons that the whole Bible is actually a storytelling book. It's a narrative story. Just that the issue, we now have got chapters and verses and. But initially, it was a storyline. So it would be good actually also to have such and also to learn from that as well. Okay, maybe one more last comment, and then we take some time to pray and we call it a day for this morning. I hope we learned a lot this morning. Yes, anyone to come, my friend, and give us what they have learned. Okay, if there is no one else, I pray and hope that the lecture from Avondale College was beneficial to us, and I pray that by God's grace, we learned how to employ the wisdom God has entrusted in us, and how we can actually reach out, and how we can be useful both for this world and for the world to come. So in conclusion, I will say these words, and by God's grace, that we may be used for, that we may. Newstart is all that we know, but there is much more to Newstart. I remember as I was just browsing through, someone said every morning, instead of just remembering Newstart, but take the new, put it at the end of the start, and what does it say? Every day start new. Make a date with God. God, today here I am, send me. Be it at work, be it at school, or in the community, at church, or wherever God may take you. Start new with God every day. Maybe I just give time for comments. Maybe one more question. Any questions? If there are no questions as well, let me appreciate your... Okay, yes, welcome.
During the study, I was asking a question about chronobiology.
Okay, it's fine. He is asking the question. You can come in the camera.
And it's a question to you, actually.
Okay, it's fine.
It's about chronobiology. It mentioned it during the study. I
Okay.
was asking if you could explain more about it, please. I was quite interested, actually.
The microbiology.
Chronobiology. It mentioned during the study.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly what is it? Because it was mentioned about the study of time and how like our biological clocks are ticking.
The natural clocks and then okay.
Yeah. Could you explain a little bit on it?
To be honest, I still have got little knowledge on that as well. But I will just tell you what I have just brushed through.
Okay.
Naturally, you have a natural clock in you. And I also have got a natural clock in me, which works directly with nature. Naturally, when it is sunset, when the sun goes down, your biological clock tells your mind it's now time to rest. That's the natural clock in you. It also, because it's time to rest, there are certain hormones which are activated to induce sleep. So what you do when it is dark determines how juicy your sleep is. So now, if you sleep when there are these lights, the production of those feel-good hormones, they are reduced. And your sleep, it's not at its peak. This is the little knowledge I have. I'm sure if it was Dr. Mioshu could explain it better. But now, even if when you wake up in the morning, when it is dawn, there are those rhythms, circadic, there's a lot that is explained there. Yes, the mind is prepared for work in the morning. But this is determined how much sleep did you get? How much did the body rejuvenated itself? How much did the body repaired itself? So the juicy sleep you have, the more prepared you take up the day. And my recommendation, if you don't find sleep during the night, this is my recommendation. Yeah, you can actually find more from Ministry of Healing about this. It's either, number one, God is waking you up so that he can speak to you. That's number one. Number two, if it's not God, it's either you ate late and its digestion is still going on and you don't have sleep. Number three, it's either the body is stressed up, there's too much cortisol in the system, still trying to calm it down. So the body is not prepared to sleep. So now, how do you handle this? If you see it's now 9 o'clock, it's now 10 o'clock, I don't have any sleep. The best is to take a bath, preferably in the evening, it's a warm bath. A contrasted bath is preferred more in the morning, preparing you for the day. But a neutral bath, a warm bath or a tub bath in the evening also induces good sleep. So this is like the little I think I can share to your question. Thank you. Maybe there's some addition from the audience. Let's hear from.
So I was thinking, listening to that. I was just thinking, listening to that, that if I can find some way, because from what you're saying, it looks like the body is following this clock, this pattern.
It's natural.
So if I can disturb that pattern, I can disturb the individual.
And you are bringing it like more home close to our United Kingdom setup.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the great controversy. That as long as I know that your body is running to this clock, if I can disturb that clock, I've won the battle.
But let me highlight this. Maybe let me emphasize this, my elder. Quote me well. No matter how much I can prepare a good plate and put it before you, no matter how much appetizing, how much appealing it is to you, it's you who takes the food into your tongue.
Yes.
So what am I saying? Self is the greatest thing that can disturb me or you.
Yes.
God has given me the power of choice. No matter how beautiful the plate is, I still have got a choice to make, whether to take it or to leave it. But what makes me usually take up the plate is because I'm not guaranteed of the next plate if I miss this.
Yes.
It's not coming up.
Yeah. I'm just thinking this in terms of the great controversy. That's why I'm agreed. I'm thinking this in terms of the great controversy. And I'm thinking in terms of great controversy in the sense that if I'm your enemy and I can disturb this natural clock, I've already won 50% of the battle.
That's how the enemy does his work.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, which means then we need, when Christ says we need to be watchful.
Yes.
I think these are some of the things we need to be watching out.
That's true.
How we are running contrary to this natural clock that we are doing. Because sometimes we get to a position where your body wants to sleep. I have to sleep. But then you say to yourself, I've got this job that I need to finish. I just need to spend another 2 hours. Or you have eaten late, and then you say, well, I know I shouldn't be eating now, but because I'm hungry, let me just eat. So that clock has already been disturbed. So I'm now 50% loss because the enemy has already disturbed my day in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. Then tomorrow morning, when he brings in his temptations, I'm at a loss.
So I think we'll discuss more about this in the afternoon. Yeah. Thank you so much for this. There was another question, isn't it? Okay, maybe one last question, then we call it a day for the next program. Hmm? Oh, I think you're coming. Come over.
That was interesting about sleep clock. Now in Britain, you get the winters. It's dark at 4 o'clock and it's not light till about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. So do you need more sleep in winter? But like in Africa, it's 6 o'clock, isn't it? All the year round, but it's not here. And do you need less sleep in summer? Because it can be where we live. It can be light at 10 o'clock at night, and it can be light at 4 o'clock in the morning. How does that work?
Okay.
Or do you just use common sense?
Okay. This is the recommendation that we get from those who are studying about sleep. Even during summer, we are getting summer, right? During the summer times, the sun goes down around 10 o'clock, and 2 hours before midnight is the recommended time.
That's what we try to
sleep.
Yeah.
So the best is to sleep 2 hours before midnight and wake up and sleep about 6, 7, 8 hours. Average 7 hours.
Yeah,
That's the average.
That's what we do.
So
yes. So it doesn't affect you. It's the amount of sleep you get at the right time.
I'm sure because of our environment, we can adjust or tailor-made it to fit us and to keep us healthy.
That's because the world's of its access, isn't it?
That's very true. That's very true.
Thank you.
And this one, it becomes more interesting in that we should know also our environment. When you're going to learn about food, we are also going to learn about our environment. Know which foods are best for what climate. What foods or which foods can actually be beneficial to me when I am doing this kind of work, be it mental, be it physical or manual or whatever. We should be intelligent in that regard as well. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It was a pleasure having you, and I hope by God's grace we will learn more about this. So I think let's get in groups of 2s or 3s. Let's share our prayer requests, and then we talk to God. One verse that I'll just leave you with today, it's 1 John chapter 2, verse 1. 1 John chapter 2, verse 1. Yes. John writes this verse He says, my little children, these things I write unto you, that you sin not. The adventure you sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll read it. Oh, sorry. I'll read it again from mind. Okay. My little children, these things write I unto you that you sin not. I was shocked when I read that it is a sin to be sick. Are you there, church? So, in light of this verse, let me paraphrase it in light of health. So John is saying, my little children, I write unto you that you may not get sick or that you live healthy. The adventure you get sick, we have the chief doctor, the true head of the medical profession, Jesus Christ the righteous. So, it's possible, is it possible to live without being sick? Answer me, church. Is it possible to live without being sick?
Yeah.
That's exactly the point. If it is possible to live without being sick, it's possible to live hearing God constantly. A healthy body is a blessing to yourself and to those around you. Are we there, church? So let's claim this as a promise. God, help us to live for you, to live without sin. That Christ may be our Savior, our Lord, our Counselor, our everything. So let's get in groups of threes and take time to talk to God, that we may live without being sick or without sin. God bless you. Amen.